I carry 23 great wounds, all got in battle. 75 men have I killed with my own hands in battle. I scatter, I burn my enemies' tents. I take away their flocks and herds. The Turks pay me a golden treasure, yet I am poor. Because I am a river to my people.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where we return for part 2 of Act 1 of Lawrence of Arabia with our very special guest, Rachel Cushing. We rejoin our conversation just after Lawrence has rescued Gassim from the desert and accepted the name El Laurence from Ollie. And while Lawrence sleeps, Ollie throws his British uniform on the fire.
Yeah. Symbolic.
The next morning, he's got a new outfit. Almost something you might want to see on the poster of a movie.
You think?
Yeah, the beautiful white. I mean, it is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see how deeply touched he is by this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a profound thing. I love the moment where they bow to him and he asks, "Is it permitted?" "Oh, yes, of course." And then he salams, he bows.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a perfect editing moment is they're good for riding. Cut to him riding. Perfect cut.
Mm-hmm.
He rides off. And it was funny. So David Lean thought, I don't know what to do in the movie right now, and just said to Lawrence, to me, it's kind of like Robert De Niro in front of the mirror in Taxi Driver. He said, "What would you do now?" And all of the bowing and the dance and the looking at the knife and all of that stuff, that's all improvised.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's Rebirth.
It is.
Right? All white, Rebirth,
This
angelic.
is the identity he's taking on at
Yes.
this moment, and he's doing it physically as well as
And it is
personally.
And it's play. It's like a child would. You know, it's a kid playing dress up.
Oh, it's
And
great.
when he's looking at the shadow on the ground
Yeah.
of when he holds up the robes and stuff, yeah, it's exactly what you would do when you put on a costume or a fancy dress for the first time.
Well, and also you think of what you just read, Steve, a man who is uncomfortable in his own skin, imagine wearing this.
Yep.
Pride, such you look incredible in this. It feels very natural. And how much comfort must he have in his own skin wearing something like this?
Well, and, you know, he said that he's always in the backstage watching a performance, and now he just got handed a new costume.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
You know, and he runs around in a circle in the wind and turns, and there is Auda Abu Dhai.
And now we come to my favorite character in the movie.
Oh, Anthony
My
Quinn.
favorite actor in the movie.
So there was, I
one American.
knew without even speaking to you that that was the case.
I love him so much. This is who I would be if I could get cast in this film and redo it. I would absolutely play this guy. It's
And
so
you'd
great.
have played it the same way,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
The whole you know the story of how he came on a set for the first time.
No.
So he was cast as Auda,
Yeah.
and they'd already started shooting the film. So he gets to set and Lean is with O'Toole shooting out in the desert, and so he goes to the makeup people and says, "Make me up as Auda." So they put the nose on, they put the whole thing on, and then he starts heading towards set, and he's starting to gather extras and crew members who are saying Auda, Auda, and then David leans over there. He's like, "What's the commotion? What's going on over there?" He looks over, and somebody says, "Oh, look, it's Auda," and he goes, "That is. Damn it, we gotta call Quinn. We don't need him. We got this guy."
That's great.
And there were guys on the set, by the way, who knew Auda Abu Dhai.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they said and Quinn says this, maybe it's legend or whatever, but Quinn says there are times where he was mistaken for Auda in conversation when he was offset with other people.
Wow.
So it could be legend, but still, he's unrecognizable in this, incredibly so.
And his performance, I don't know how many, how much horsepower is in this performance, but it's a lot.
Yep.
It's exquisite.
And it's funny.
Yes.
Yes, very. He's just a larger than life character, and
He's
he
a pirate.
plays that.
He's
Yeah,
a pirate.
yeah,
That's what
right.
he's a sand pirate.
Well, and he's enjoying the show.
Yes.
He knows the show's going on, and
He's
he likes
amused.
it.
Yeah.
He's amused by the whole thing. And he's just sort of, "Who are you, Englishman?" You could see Lawrence's sadness of like, "Oh, they still know I'm English."
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you doing, Englishman?
As you see.
And it's funny. He says, "I'm out of Abu Dhai," and immediately Lawrence is playing him.
I've heard of another man of that name.
Other? What other?
The Auda I'd heard of wouldn't need to summon help to look after his wealth.
He must be a great hero.
He is. He wouldn't refuse water to men coming out of the great Nefud desert.
Now, would he not? No, that must be some other man.
And he says he calls up his help, and that's when his kid shows up. And I love that he sends them off. He's like, they're stealing water. Tell them we are coming. And the kid rides off with his gun drawn. Like, that's a kind of a gutsy move. And we get to the wells. Auda jumps the water. I love the kid has his gun trained on Lawrence and makes him raise his hands, which is really funny. And he wants him to empty more water. And Ali goes, do not.
Empty that.
Do not!
And now we have Sheriff Ali and Auda Abu Dai.
Yeah.
Standoff.
Does your father still steal?
No. Does Auda take me for one of his own bastards?
No, there is no resemblance. Alas, you resemble your father.
Auda flatters me.
You are easily flattered. I knew your father well.
Did you know your own?
Their insults towards each other are fantastic.
Yes.
It's all great.
Yeah.
And Lawrence's response to Auda is, call off your men.
Yes.
This is the thing about this movie. It's really fun.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it gets to some heavy stuff, but there are times in that you're just having a ball.
Yeah.
And Lawrence manipulates him from get the hell out of my well to I'm going to show you Hawitat hospitality.
So, you desire my hospitality?
Yes.
You see your tongue?
We do desire it.
Then it is given, if you will take it. I am at my summer camp, a poor place. Well, to me, it seems a poor place. Some men find it marvelous.
And he does this great.
Dine with me. Dine with Auda English. Dine with a Hawitat Harith. It is my pleasure that you dine with me in Wadi Rum.
This looks like a heck of a meal to have.
This became a thing for my mom because she loved the movie so much. She would always make me belch after dinner to prove I enjoyed the dinner. You cannot leave the table
That is the
until
first
you belch.
mom I've ever heard of that would
Yes.
encourage such an action.
I just learned so much about
Did you enjoy it? I'm like, so I was trained to do that from
Now on, every time we eat, I'm going to ask you to.
it was, it was like an inside joke between us, and it was always great.
One interesting thing about this. So this movie, you talk about a cast of thousands. This movie literally does have a cast.
Oh
of
my
thousands.
God, yes.
Huge scenes, and the gathering of people around this feast are huge. And one of the interesting things for a movie that has a cast of thousands, you only catch the smallest glimpses of women in this whole film.
There's hardly any,
Like just tiny from the side. You see in this scene they're kind of in the background, but basically it's a cast of thousands of with 994 are men.
Yeah, there's no lines for women other than the la, 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 la when they're leaving.
Yeah.
That's the only time, which is incredible.
Yeah. And then we get this great scene of Lawrence manipulating Auda into attacking Aqaba. And and you see the genius of this person, how he, creates word traps for Auda. Because we get into this idea of prophet, and that Auda, talks about prophet versus being a servant, and that he can't be a servant, and that he doesn't work for the Turks. He's like, oh, you permit the Turks to be here? And he goes, yes.
You permit the Turks to stay in Aqaba.
Yes, it is my pleasure.
Because it is my pleasure.
And then Auda's like, well, what's this thing you're working for Faisal? And he goes, oh, we don't work it for Faisal. He's like, oh, you work it for the English? He's like, no, for the Arabs. And this is the first time we're really hearing this idea of
Together.
of this group together that are supposed to be the Arabs. And Auda's like, I don't know what tribe that is.
The Arabs. The Hawitat, Ajili, Rala, Beni Sakha, these I know. I have even heard of the Harith. But the Arabs, what tribe is that?
They're a tribe of slaves. They serve the Turks.
Well, they are nothing to me. My tribe is the Hawitat.
Work only for profit.
And Auda's pissed off by this. Am I served? And again, and then Ali's great. It's the servant that takes the money. There's a lot of stuff in here. And then Auda makes this speech.
I am Auda Abu Tayi. Does Auda serve? Does Auda Abu Tayi serve? I carry 23 great wounds, all got in battle. 75 men have I killed with my own hands in battle. I scatter, I burn my enemies' tents. I take away their flocks and herds. The Turks pay me a golden treasure, yet I am poor. Because I am a river to my people.
I love the sweeping hand to my people. I am a river to my people. I love the sweeping hand. He's so demonstrative, but he's authentic. For all his lunacy and nuttiness and swagger, he is authentic. Probably the most authentic person in the movie. There is no game he is playing here. He is overt about what he likes and what he does not like, what he wants and what he does not want. Does he paint it in a certain way that is positive to him? Yes, but he is still authentic.
Well, he is. I mean, he has some poor subterfuge going on.
Yes.
You know, like there's this great moment where
Because he can't lie. He's not built to lie.
he's a terrible liar.
He's a terrible liar.
And it's funny that the moment when he does this speech and Lawrence is looking up at him, that's a look of like pure love. Like he's like, oh, I found a real warrior. Like this is a warrior from my books.
Yep.
You know, that's the kind of person this is. And then Auda says how much he gets paid. And it's funny, I think there's a ripple of, oh shit, he gets that much? That happens amongst his people. Yeah. And then Lawrence counters with
150, Auda.
Who told thee that?
I have long ears.
And a long tongue between them.
100, 150, what matters? It's a trifle. A trifle, which they take from a great box they have.
In Aqaba.
In Aqaba.
Where else?
You trouble me like women.
Again, authentic.
yeah. And then Lawrence has the capper. He's like,
The epiphany.
yeah, friends, we've been foolish.
Friends, we have been foolish. Auda will not come to Aqaba.
No.
For money,
No.
for Faisal,
No.
nor to drive away the Turks. He will come because it is his pleasure.
Thy mother mated with a scorpion.
Thy mother mated with a scorpion.
It's at that moment Auda's like, uh-oh, this guy just completely outplayed me.
Yep.
And and he honors him. He respects him
Yep.
for it.
Oh, he does.
Because
Yeah.
he beat him at his own game in such a great way.
Yeah. Well, and Lawrence knows this is the guy I need.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, and this is really hard to kind of figure out, and real historians would wrestle with this and, you know, much more than I ever could, but it seems like Auda was maybe far more important to the Arab Revolt than Lawrence.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
His ancestors sued the production after the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Because
it went on for like 10 plus years.
because they didn't like the way he was
lawsuit.
portrayed, because he was way more important. And there's a play called Ross, I think, and his character is very central to that play and is portrayed way more three-dimensionally than he is here. He was still about the money, very much so still, but he was much more about believing in the Arab Revolt as well and the coming together of the people.
He was he was more of a linchpin in terms of convincing Arab tribes to come together and being a figurehead in that, like, well, he's a part of this revolution, maybe we should be too, kind of a thing.
And this is a good place, Steve, for you as the filmmaker, as the scriptwriter, but sometimes you have to make adjustments to characters to make them stand out from other characters, because they have to be unique in how they play this. If you had another character that was just like Faisal, it wouldn't have been as interesting. Because if he was going to be that important to the role, you have to have these characters, and yes, based on a true story, but if they fit the story better, to change them a little bit, that's what a lot of film directors do with these based on true story movies. That's where based on is the real important part.
It's, for me, it's not just sometimes, it's all times.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the reality is your first job as a filmmaker is to make a film that is entertaining.
Yeah.
And then what your secondary considerations are, like, if you go like, no, I have to make this accurate, and therefore you sacrifice that your film is no longer enjoyable to watch, well, then nobody watches your film, and then what was the point of making it accurate in the first place?
You might as well made a documentary.
Yeah. And which are, in many ways, I think, more manipulative of the truth than based on a true story.
They inevitably have a point of view.
Because at least when you see based on a true story, you know this isn't really real.
Right.
Like, you know when you go to see Ray, or you go to see, you know, name whatever biopic you want.
Cinderella Man.
That, like, that's not really what happened.
Right.
And I think a responsible filmmaker, does the research, and B, is loyal to a big T truth, even though they're sacrificing a little T truth.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's just not going to be reality. You got a couple hours or 3 hours and 42 minutes to tell the story of a lifetime often.
Yeah.
And, you're going to have to make choices. It's like there's, like you look at a movie like The Social Network, that's one where,
Oh, yeah.
it's a good movie, but man, he invented an entire motivation for a character that did not exist.
Never existed.
Yeah. That I think is, and I love Aaron Sorkin. He's one of my favorite writers, but I think that was totally irresponsible. And I like the movie.
For somebody, I mean, and it's also different when you're talking about
Someone's
something that
alive.
is so recent and alive and still involved in his own industry and in everything, and to be possibly negatively affected in that way. Yeah, it does strike me as a little bit more on the irresponsible side. Whereas when we tell more historic based 100 years after the fact type of things, I mean, this wasn't 100 years, this was only about 40, 50, but there's still space there, and you're not probably negatively affecting.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard though as well, because like there's a quote from Spielberg that bothers me that's on like the Blu-ray in one of the documentaries. And he kind of says, he sort of says, look, sometimes, as we're saying, you have to kind of mess with things, and it depends on, how central that historical event is to your experience. And he said, when I made a movie about the Holocaust, everything had to be 100% accurate. But this isn't as central, what the events of this movie aren't as central to us, so it's not as accurate, and that's okay.
They're central to somebody.
This is my problem with the quote.
Yeah.
And to me, like, look, this is literally the formation of the modern Middle East is happening in this, and we have, honestly, the politics of the modern Middle East are central to all of us.
No.
And it's something that we largely don't understand very well. And so while this is, like I said, my favorite movie, if I were to make a film like this today, I would work harder to be more accurate.
Sure.
And maybe tell not the story of the white guy coming to save the day.
I was going to say, you would shift the point of view to be a bit more about the genesis of the current Arab political state.
Yeah. So we're riding off to Aqaba?
Yeah.
There we go.
Make God your agent! Aqaba!
T. Lawrence is smiling like a crazy person. We have this wonderful musical build, and then it's that night, and Ali and Lawrence climb the hill, and there in front of them is Aqaba.
Yeah.
Which is shot in Spain, by the way.
They built it.
They built all that whole thing.
They had been staying in the real Aqaba when they were shooting in the desert, but then when they moved to, the real Aqaba wouldn't work for that establishing shot of them riding through the town and then coming out and you're seeing the gun pointed out to sea. They couldn't shoot that in the actual Aqaba, so they had to build their own, and they found like a riverbed right on the coast in Spain and built it themselves.
Wow.
Yep. And then as they're saying, like, hey, I think we're going to really do this, bang, gunshot. And they come down, and there's a man who killed one of Ali's men, killed one of Auda's men, and he dies, and this is the end of Aqaba, because now we're going to have a blood feud between these two tribes.
And they're so matter of fact about it. Like, that's it. This is part of our culture.
Right.
Like, this happened. Sorry, done.
Yep.
And Lawrence comes up with a solution.
The law says the man must die. If he dies, will that content the Hawitans?
Yes?
Sheriff Ali, if none of Lord Auda's men harms any of yours, will that content the Harith?
Yes?
Then I will execute the law. I have no tribe. And no one is offended.
And he gets the gun, and he walks over, and they reveal the person on the ground who did the murder, and it's Gassim.
Gassim.
It is so heartbreaking. And Peter O'Toole's face.
Yes.
Oh, man.
This is the beginning of the end of Lawrence, like the noble Lawrence.
Yeah.
This moment. And
Although I think it's the right thing to do
course,
in this circumstance.
But sometimes in life, you cannot control where your destiny takes you. He has to do this for once for the greater good.
Yep.
And he has to do this. And yeah, it's the beginning of the end of him questioning everything that's going to happen now.
Because it's so hard. Like, what in the moment, wouldn't you be thinking, I shouldn't have gone out and saved him.
Yes.
Because then this wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
You know, like you start to play that this is not black and white. This is
Right.
a very gray situation. And he, like you said, made the right decision, but it is going to haunt him for the rest of the film.
And also, why? Why, when I brought you out? Why, when we're so close? Why would you do
Because
this?
God had already decided that he should
And that's
die.
something Lawrence
Well, I
has
mean,
a hard
and
time
honestly,
reconciling.
as I'm an atheist, but at that moment, I would have that thought, shit, maybe they were right about this God thing. Like, because it sure seems
He was meant to die.
Oh, you mean like it was a Final Destination thing? He was supposed to die.
he was supposed to die.
Well,
Yeah.
Lawrence gave him life, and Lawrence took it away.
Yeah. And by the way, this really did happen. It wasn't
It wasn't
the guy,
Gassim.
It
Wasn't the guy that he
Gassim.
saved.
It
but-
wasn't a guy he saved, but it was a guy that, there was the attack was about to fall apart and he had to execute the guy. And what he says, his hand shook so much that it took like 6 shots to kill the guy.
Well, that's in the movie, and they don't show it's that low angle shot on Lawrence. And what's so like awful about it is that he shoots and you can tell it wasn't a kill shot because he has to adjust the gun and then shoots again.
That's right.
And then there's like 3 rapid fire shots. So I'm like, oh my God, this wasn't just like a one and done thing. This was like, it had to shoot multiple times and it stays on Lawrence the whole time. And it's just heartbreaking.
Which makes sense why it would haunt him.
Yep.
Yeah. And Lawrence is obviously wrecked and
Yeah.
completely upset. Auda doesn't understand
Right.
the problem. And he's like, oh, well, that was the guy he took out of the desert. And Auda's response is, oh, well, it was written then.
It was written. Yeah.
And Ollie really tries to make him feel better. The writing is still yours.
Yeah.
And Lawrence can't even speak. Again, he's gone to this state that he goes to, and he tosses his gun, and the Arabs scramble for it. And the camera zooms in on Lawrence's face. And there's something so, in my opinion, distasteful about what he sees as they scramble for that gun.
Yeah.
A minute he was so connected with this group. He was like part of this great army on this great heroic mission. Now, not so much.
Yeah.
But this
he's can't reconcile it all. That's like it's the thing he's got to do the entire movie, and he's ultimately not able to. But he is giving the Arabs a far more of a chance than like any of the other British in trying to understand them and to relate to them and whatnot. But ultimately, there are some cultural things about this group of people that for thousands of years, this is how they've thought and this is how they teach their children.
Yep.
And it's something he cannot wrap his head around. And like you said, actually does find distasteful in this moment.
Well, and also it is the destruction of his expectations. Like he put these expectations of honor and nobility, and he loved their culture so much that he thought they were above the very human thing of scrambling for a article of notoriety or some kind of object of symbolism.
That was just used to kill one of their own.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
But it's the honor of having it. And
Yep.
so he thought, well, the Arabs wouldn't do that. The British would do that. Or the white people would do that, but not the Arabs. And then when he sees the Arabs do it, there is a destruction in himself as well of like, oh, well then there is no utopian place for me to go.
Nope.
There is no noble place for me to be,
Yep.
to belong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the thing. He felt he belonged,
Yes.
and now he's back,
Yeah.
backstage,
Back in limbo.
watching again.
Yep.
Feeling disconnected. But it's time for the attack.
Yeah.
And he's on his camel, and we charge straight ahead, and we kind of see the very unprepared Turks. I love the little shot of the pinup inside one of the Turks' tents.
Yeah.
And as the music is rising, and they charge in, and they have a small defense with a few small arms and they hit a few riders, and they charge through, and finally, when the music climaxes, we see those guns, big guns, pointed to the sea.
Lawrence was right.
But by the way, in the real attack, Lawrence is firing with his pistol from the back of his camel and shoots his own camel in the back of the head,
Oh,
killing
Jesus.
it, and goes down.
Oh my
Oh my God.
Jesus.
I could see why that didn't make the movie.
It did not make the movie. But we win, and now it's the sunset over the Red Sea. And what's funny, I because every once in a while watching a movie, I always kind of look at what the time is because I'm curious in terms of movie structure, how long. This is at 1 hour and 49 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is as long as most movies.
Yep.
Just to get to here.
Yep.
And Lawrence is looking out in the sunrise, and Ollie throws flowers for him.
The miracle is accomplished. Garlands for the conqueror.
And what does Lawrence do? He jumps off the
in the water.
camel to get those flowers, scrambles for them like a
Yeah,
kid.
it's funny because again, it's that physicality of that performance, and I know it's probably the waves buffeting him too, but it's not graceful.
No.
The way that he goes after the garland.
And then we have this great moments where Ollie goes on again, because I think Ollie, has now fully admires he's
in awe of Lawrence.
This person. And he says, "Tribute for the prince, flowers for the man." To which Lawrence's response is,
I'm none of those things, Ali.
What then?
Don't know.
I think he's starting to believe, though, that he's a prophet and a miracle worker. And he doesn't know, but he's got an inkling of that great man, extraordinary man thing.
well, and this is another "Who am I? Who are you?" moment, because he says, "What are you then?" Don't know.
Yeah.
I would have told Auda, "Don't touch the radio," because Auda breaks up that radio. They're looting this whole place, which looting was totally normal in war up until this is the end of it. Like after this war, that becomes a much smaller part of war. And he's looking around for that gold, and he cannot find it.
Paper! There is no gold in Aqaba. No gold. No great box.
To which Lawrence's response is, "Did Auda come to Aqaba for gold?" "No, for my pleasure, as you said. But gold is honorable."
And he's right.
And what does Lawrence do? He gets out a piece of paper.
Writes him a check.
Yeah.
The Crown of England promises to pay 5,000 golden guineas to Auda Abu Tayi. Signed, in His Majesty's absence, by me.
That's awesome. And what does he say he's going to do? He's going to go off to Cairo to tell the generals, because the radio's broken.
Right.
He's going to cross Sinai, which is a big, huge desert.
Yet again.
Cross one desert.
Right.
Why not cross another one?
And Auda says, "You're going to go cross Sinai?" He says, "Why not? Moses did."
Here comes the prophet.
Yeah.
Yep.
And who does he take with him? He takes Daoud and Farash.
Yeah.
But not before. I do find it interesting that this is the first time, well, not the first time, but Ali is skeptical of this move. And he's worried about, you just want to get back to your people and
That's
to
a great point.
discard these silly clothes that you're wearing. And you're essentially abandoning us just when I thought maybe you really were for the Arab cause. And he has to trust that that's not what Lawrence is doing, that he's doing the right thing, because he's like, I can't send an Arab to tell them that this news.
Which is also insulting in its own way.
It is, but it's a realistic
absolutely
point that he's making, and he's basically asking Ali to trust him, that he knows that this is the best move. And I find that it's like the first little test in the relationship.
Well, and his response when Ali lays into him, like, "Oh, you're just going to throw off all our silly clothes," is, "You're an ignorant man," which is not nice.
Didn't hold back.
No. Well, I mean, this is the thing about this arrogant, brilliant person, is that he's not easy for any of us to be around. So we're off in Sinai, and Lawrence decides not only are we going to go across this desert, but we're not even going to sleep until we get to Cairo. And that is ego.
Yeah.
That is about him aggrandizing himself. And
it's about to bite him in the ass.
He is losing it. There's this weird moment where he looks off and sees like a dust devil, and he goes, "It's a pillar of fire." And what
strikes me as a biblical thing to say.
Of course.
So we're really leaning into this prophet character that he thinks that he is.
Yes.
Well, and it's a poetic thing. Sure. I mean, it's like him. He's existing on this kind of other. I don't mean that he's a prophet existing on another plane, but his brain is working in this ways that Daoud and Farash can't. And really, most people around him
never be able
to keep up with. And because he laughs when they're like, "No, it's dust. It's not a pillar of fire." And he just thinks that's funny. And I really think he's just like, I think he's gone into his own special weird place. I mean, sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, the craziness he's been through, and now he's off in the desert. We go into a dust storm where he drops his compass, and which we had established before is how he's going to navigate, obviously. And
now he's just like follow the sun,
Follow
hit
the
the
sun.
canal.
They head out. I know. I keep writing down. That's an amazing shot. That's an amazing shot. Again, another dust storm, and there's the quicksand.
Oh God, heartbreaking.
And Daoud. By the way, this is not how Daoud died. I don't remember how Daoud died, but this wasn't it. But they run to him, and I love that he tackles Farosh before.
Yeah, he understands that he could lose both of them
Yeah.
very easily, and stops that from happening.
Unwraps his turban or whatever you call it, head cloth, hands it to him, and it slips through his fingers, and the camera pulls back, and he's gone.
Yeah.
Oof.
And the dust storm, and they bury their heads, and he's crying. Farouche is crying.
And you can, it's impossible not to read into it in the sense of your ego led you to, oh, we're just going to cross the Sinai. Oh, we're just not going to sleep. And in like all of the, miracles I've pulled off, all of the impossible things that I've accomplished, that I'm untouchable.
Yeah.
And he still believes he's untouchable, but now he's affecting the people around him that love him.
Yeah.
And he's had this kind of special little bond with these boys, and now he got him killed.
Well, and this goes back to what you said earlier, Steve, to give us background on T. Lawrence. Like maybe the writers and the filmmakers knew this about him, his personality, so they slid it in narratively in the film, right?
Totally.
These unnecessary things to push his body to complete exhaustion, to test himself, to see how far he can go, to see how powerful he really is. And people pay the price for it, in the movie at least.
Well, they did in real life too.
There we go.
The thing I always think about is like, someone says this thing is an impossible thing to do, and then you do the thing, and we're not aware of how lucky we got.
Right.
We go, oh no, I proved them wrong. I can do the impossible thing. Not, oh, you just rolled the dice and got a great rollback.
Right.
That's not what you do. And if that happens 2 or 3 times, it reinforces your belief in your own, awesomeness.
Infallibility.
Except for the fact that you can't factor in your luck.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is what I think is happening with Lawrence. He's had because let's say that Gassim was a quarter of a mile that way, or a dust storm is hit, then you don't find him.
Yeah.
You got lucky to find him. Which
True.
doesn't mean
Very
you're not,
true.
It doesn't mean you're not awesome. You are awesome, but it also means you can't. And none of us can do this. None of us can judge our own luck. It's really hard. One thing that is fairly clearly implied in 7 Pillars of Wisdom was his probable sexual relation with Daoud and Farosh.
Oh.
And
it's been a sort of a
Really?
a talking point as to whether or not some biographers and historians say he was homosexual. Some say that he wasn't, but it's in the movie, that's the characters that if you know that, or you think that you sort of look for possible.
And in 7 Pillars, he sort of says like, there are physical things that happen between men when they were amongst men, and that doesn't say, he kind of makes a vague allusion to that, particularly with these 2 young men. And one of the interesting things in 7 Pillars is it is dedicated with love or something to S.A. And there's a long ongoing discussion about who S.A. might have been, because none of his immediate friends had those initials.
Right.
Daoud's real name had the initials S.A.
Oh.
Now, that's not evidence.
Right.
That's conjecture.
But that is a conjecture. But there's no question, it's not a conjecture, that the death of Daoud, which I don't think was quicksand, but was around this time, was hugely effective on his life.
I'm sure.
They keep marching. This is like, to me, this is like the zombie walk.
Yeah.
Again, he's gone into like this fugue state. He's not responding. Farosh is calling him from the camel while he walks.
Right, because he's walking.
Yeah.
And Farosh is like, we can both ride the camel,
Well,
but
it's
it's like he's
penance.
doing
He's
exactly.
doing penance,
Yep.
And think of how scary this is. You just lost your best friend.
Yeah.
And now your leader is not responding to you, walking like a zombie. You're in the middle of nowhere in the desert. You have no compass. Like, you're going to die. I mean, this is really scary. Yeah. And finally, eventually convinces him to get on the camel, which they do. And they continue to ride. And we go, it's creepy. I find this sequence weird and disturbing. And we start to go past this barbed wire, and there's some kind of old fortress. And it's like, what? Where are we? What has occurred? Farosh runs off, leaving Lawrence just sitting on this camel. He runs back. Lawrence is totally not responding, throws water in his face. And then when Lawrence comes around, the way Peter O'Toole plays it is just so matter of fact. It's
It's all right, Farosh.
It's all right.
It's all right. Yeah.
And then you hear this horn, this ship's horn. And they run forward and see again. I know saying this is an amazing shot. It's so redundant at this point. But the ship traveling through the desert is one of the strangest shots in the world.
Because you just look at it and you're like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So you're just
Can't
like, wait,
possibly
what's happening?
And it ends up that we've reached the Suez Canal. And we hear, as you alluded to before, this guy on this motorcycle yelling to them, "Who are you?
Who are you? Who are you?
Did you know that that's David Lean?
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
In the restored version, I don't know if it was in the original, but when they restored it in '89, they found nearly all of the film, but couldn't find most of the soundtrack. That's why they had to go in and they had to redo a lot of the lines. And Peter O'Toole came back in and redid his lines, and other actors that were alive did. And David Lean dubbed the line for that, and I don't think they intended on keeping him, but it was like one of those things where they just never got around to having somebody else read it, so it just ended up in there.
Nothing wrong with that.
We're back in Cairo. I find all the color in Cairo very shocking after the desert.
Yes.
And we open up a truck where they've been lying, and Farash wakes up with Daoud, which is just brutal.
Yeah.
And Lawrence, still dressed in his Arab robes, is marching right into headquarters, and people are trying to stop him. And
Love it.
even when they recognize him, like, you can't go in there. And the fact that he's bringing Farouche with him is definitely wrong, because Arabs are not allowed in there. And this is where we're really seeing the racism that exists within this group. And they go up to into this same bar that we had been in before. They go up to the bartender, and the guy behind the bar is like, "No, Effendi, no, you must go," trying to protect him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love he does this great, what we would call today a code switch, where he's talking to him nicely.
Yeah.
You got to get out. And then when the other British officers are coming closer, he's like, "Get out."
Yeah.
He turns into the hard ass, and he says,
We want 2 large glasses of lemonade.
This is a powerful British officers.
That's all right. We are not particular.
I love that it's lemonade.
yeah. As he's and the intensity of Peter O'Toole is so amazing.
Yep.
Um,
So it's just so steeped in the emotion of like what he's just been through, and that the last thing that happened was the loss of Daoud, and so he's just, his shoulders are up and like his eyes not blinking, like it is just so, he's so coiled tightly in that moment.
Plus the palpable racism in the air.
Oh, yeah.
These
Of the people he loved.
and they're all like yelling and it's really. It could turn into a lynching situation. It looks so unsettling in that moment.
well, and this is the racism they're expressing is for the one of the 2 young men that he loves.
Yep.
Regardless of how we define that love,
Right.
he clearly loves this guy, of which one of them just died.
Yeah. Who comes over to talk to him? Is it just some soldier, or is it Allenby, or is it
Brighton?
I thought it was Brighton.
I think it is. I think you're right.
Colonel
I think it's
Brighton cuts through.
Brighton comes over.
So he
at
goes,
that point.
"My God."
It's like, explain yourself. And he says, "We've taken Aqaba."
Taken Aqaba? Who has?
We have. Our side in this war has. The Wogs have. We have.
And the shock of that.
They're
like,
all
what are
like-
you talking about? How is that possible?
Right.
Our side, and then he uses, and I think the term is wogs, which is
Yeah, it comes
is the
up.
racial epithet, I believe, for Arabs. It's not
Yeah,
one that's
it comes
current.
up later when he's in Damascus.
Well, and he says, in order to explain what they've done, he uses that term to describe who it was he took it with.
Right.
And you have this great moment where Farash is chugging down the lemonade, and he says, "He likes your lemonade," which is one of the funniest lines in the movie. I think that is a great line. And even there's this moment like, "What happened to the Turks?" And he goes, "Oh, they're gone. Well, we took some prisoners, but we took them boots." And you see him processing
He's
through
just he's just rattling it, man.
yeah. And his guilt over
Yeah.
the death and
Yes.
his wanting to do it better, but also his pride in what happened. And someone's like, "No, it is impossible." He's, "Yes, it is. I did it. I did it."
I know.
It's really important. Well, and the truth is, he did.
Right.
You know, to some degree, at least in the context of the movie.
Sure.
They say, "Well, you better talk to Allenby," which was like, "Oh, well, that's an improvement." And he wants a room with a bed, and they're like, "Yeah, we could do that. It's for him."
Raj.
And he goes, "Oh, I'm going to go see Allenby. I better shave." And they're like, "Yeah, and get into some good clothes." And the dirty look he throws is so intense. And here's my question: is that if Ollie hadn't said what he said to him at the end, would Lawrence have changed into the uniform?
You want to believe? No.
Yeah.
But it's Actually, I think I do believe that. I think that he was enamored enough and the Arabs meant enough to him that he would have been insulted by that comment, whether or not Ali had said that to him at Aqaba.
Yeah. I think the pride.
That might be a little
I don't
naive of me. I don't know.
I think the pride with which he received the robes might have kicked in at that moment.
Sure.
But I also think he would have changed anyway eventually because politically he
would understand that was to be the smart move.
Yeah.
Let's go meet Allenby.
That's General Allenby. Jack Hawkins.
Jack Hawkins is great.
Love him.
Yes.
Apparently, when they went to get his uniform, they went to the same Savile Road tailor that Allenby had gone through, and the tailor was still alive. It said,
wow.
It said, yeah, I'll give you exactly what General Allenby
Oh,
said.
that's
That's
incredible.
awesome.
Isn't that awesome? And I love him just going through undisciplined, unpunctual, untidy language.
He's just taking the hit.
He's just kind of going through.
You're an interesting man, there's no doubt about it. Who told you to take Aqaba?
And then we get into this strategic sort of conversation.
Aqaba's important.
Why is it important?
It's the Turkish route to the canal.
Not anymore. They're coming through Beersheba.
I know, but we've gone forward to Gaza.
So,
So that left Aqaba behind your right.
true.
And it will be further behind your right when you go for Jerusalem.
Am I going for Jerusalem?
Yes.
Very well. Aqaba behind my right.
This is a more, how would I say this? This is a more intelligent general than the first general that sent him.
No question about
Yeah.
it.
He understands, he's more circumspect. He understands what the situation is, what needs to be done. And he's only like just talking to Lawrence as a way of maybe getting information in an unconventional way, but still getting information.
Well, Allenby's clearly brilliant.
Yes.
I mean, he's like
Practical.
and very
brilliant.
Right.
practical.
He's a tactician. He
Yes.
understands that he's there to win a war. He is not there to be a politician, which is a juxtaposition we'll learn later when
Right.
he's talking with Dryden and Faisal. But in this moment, he is clearly a brilliant enough general to understand that what Lawrence just accomplished makes his life easier
Yeah.
as the general trying to win a war against the Turks.
For now.
Yeah. Well, and they even go to like should we shift the Turks out of Medina? And Lawrence is like, no, you should leave them there, which is a really important strategic decision.
Yeah.
Which definitely does come from T.E. Lawrence, from my understanding, is that really was his strategy. And it's based on Lawrence was a brilliant strategic thinker. And there are a lot of people today thinking that have studied what he did. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But
Wow.
and then they get to this moment of like, well, who told you to take Aqaba? And Lawrence's response is, well, shouldn't officers use their initiative at all times?
Not really. It's awfully dangerous, Lawrence.
That is not the British way.
It's awfully dangerous.
And Lawrence's response is, I know. And Allenby is like, oh, already. As if that's like a thing, because I'm sure it's in some book that says officers serving in the field should use their initiative at all times.
Sure.
And the higher ups kind of go like, we really don't actually want you to do that. And he goes immediately, I'm going to approach you to major, which by the way, going from a lieutenant to a major, that's a long way.
Yeah, it is.
It jumps a few.
Yeah.
You're skipping captain.
Yeah. And particularly if he's like a second lieutenant. He's
You're skipping lieutenant.
Yeah.
First lieutenant, yeah.
Which I'm not entirely sure if the British ranks match up exactly that way, but it's a big promotion. And he goes, I want you to go back. And Lawrence says, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. They have to convince him.
Yeah. And there's this, he says, well, why? He's like, well, I killed two people. One was a boy yesterday, and the other he had to execute with his pistol. And there was something about it I didn't like.
Oh, so powerful.
Yeah.
There was something about it I didn't like.
Well, naturally.
No, something else.
I see. Well, that's all right. Let it be a warning.
No, something else.
What then?
I enjoyed it.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's an inner power struggle.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that he doesn't want to go back because he recognizes that that's what it is, and that likely if he goes back, he will have to delve more into that side of himself.
Well, and also what that must be like to have constantly thought yourself above the violent instinct, above the violent response because you were intelligent and you're smart and you're well-read and you're well-traveled. The fact that you could still find some kind of excitement or joy or, God forbid, attraction to the primal nature of yourself must be a hell of a thing for a man that intelligent or that well thought, that critical of a thinker.
Yeah.
To believe that he can be a base animal no matter how much he elevates himself.
And given that that's the way most people saw the Arabs, and that was the as you say, the base aspect of them as a people and a culture, their barbarity is the thing that he is trying to ignore.
Great point.
And yet now he's relating to it. And as we know in the second half of the movie, where he goes with that.
Well, and that he's publicly exposed the most private or hated part of himself, and he just put it out there. And this is where you see, I think, that the full genius of Allenby. Because Allenby's response to you're in this moment where the dude just like, I enjoyed killing someone. And Allenby goes, rubbish. And then he just goes,
What do you mean by coming here dressed like that? Amateur theatricals?
Oh, yes, entirely.
Let me see that hat thing or whatever it is.
and he completely shifts the moment.
Yeah.
He like goes to this totally different place. Kind of how would I look at this? And Brighton goes, oh, damn ridiculous. And we just kind of moved on. And he turns to Claude Rains. What do you think, Dryden? And his response is, before he did it, I would have said it couldn't be done. And then we turn to Brighton, and Lawrence is like, well, I know what he thinks, expecting him to say something terrible about it. And Brighton's response is, it was a brilliant bit of soldiering.
Which is exactly what you would expect the second part of that anyway, to Brighton to say. Which is why I like the character of Brighton. And I do think what you said a while ago about the choices that he made was that, interestingly, even though it's a very minor character, he does get an arc in the movie. And I love checking in with him here based on the last time we saw him, and already the progression, and then as we see at the end. But
well, it's interesting. Again, this Kane comparison continues. They're very different, but like Bernstein is a character who could never do what Kane does,
right?
But admires and supports him on some level. And Brighton's not that, but he's definitely kind of that. Kind of has some of that. Oh, I outrank this guy, but this is a remarkable person, and I am not.
Yeah,
And didn't Lean say that Brighton is the only honorable character in the movie or something to that level? And I think that it's in relation to Brighton being able to get past his initial. It's so hard for us to, as human beings, we make assumptions about somebody, and then it's very difficult to admit we were wrong about it. And this is Brighton clearly admitting that he had misjudged Lawrence and acknowledging that. And that, I think, is a difficult thing to do, generally speaking. And I think maybe that's what Lean was referring to in terms of his, just, it's a little character arc, but it's a profound one.
The film is full of them, which is what decorates the film so well.
So, and there's a great moment where he calls in Mr. Perkins, whoever that is, who comes in and he snaps to his attention. We only see his legs. We're framed on Lawrence and we see his legs. What do you think, Mr. Perkins? Bloody marvelous. And the fact that we don't go up to him and we're real, because what it's really about is the reaction shot. It's really about Peter O'Toole's reaction to this moment, and his responses to Allenby is, "You're a clever man."
He realized how he just got played into going back.
You just played, and that's a great moment of like, this guy played him. He knows that he played him. He says, you played me. And the guy acknowledges, yes, I did play you. And he says,
no, but I know a good thing when I see one. That's fair, surely.
And now we're in the midst of a fairly highbrow strategic conversation, which the audience isn't supposed to get. I mean, they talk about Clausewitz and they talk about, left and right and artillery and moving troops and stuff like that. And we end up at the bar, and immediately Allenby announces, I'm here at the invitation of Major Lawrence, essentially announcing his seal of approval on this guy. Yeah. This is brilliant leadership.
Yes.
He
recognizes what Dryden did originally, and that this guy, he's actually going to make a difference in our campaign and can be used symbolically as much as strategically.
Yeah.
Well, and he's also telling all the other officers here how to react to this guy because he has my seal of approval. And he's also figured out that this guy has a big ego, and this is what's going to how to play this guy. Yeah. Like he is, and he is a brilliant leader in the way that Lawrence is not. And he couldn't do what Lawrence can do, and Lawrence can't do what Allenby can do. Yeah. And then we sit down, and now it's very clear as they start to talk strategy that Lawrence always intended to go back.
Yeah.
He already had figured out what they should do.
1,000 Arabs means 1,000 knives, delivered anywhere, day or night. It means 1,000 camels,
That means 1,000 packs of high explosive and 1,000 crack rifles. We can cross Arabia while Johnny Turk is still turning round. I'll smash his railways. And while he's mending them, I'll smash them somewhere else. In 13 weeks, I can have Arabia in chaos.
You are going back then?
Yes. Of course, I'm going back.
What's so interesting, by the way, is that T.E. Lawrence figured out a strategy that's based on a tremendous knowledge of history that has been used over and over and over again in ways that maybe we're not so happy about since then. And it starts with Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is the great military philosopher, which of course Lawrence read. And he talked about numerical weakness comes from having to prepare against possible attacks. Numerical strength comes from compelling our adversary to make these preparations against us. So if you make someone prepare to defend multiple attacks, you make them dissipate all of their resources, and then you can concentrate your forces to attack just one place. So even though the Turkish army had 100 times as many troops and bigger guns and all that stuff, they can't defend everywhere. And so they have to then split up that huge army to defend all sorts of little places, which means just 100 of the Arab army going in the night and attacking unexpectedly allows you to force them to defend everywhere and therefore defend nowhere. Oh, here's the T. Lawrence quote. This is what he said. War upon rebellion is messy and slow, like eating soup with a knife. That's what he wanted to make the Turkish army do. Try to eat soup with a knife. Messy and slow. Yeah. And these are tactics that the guerrilla war in the Spanish used against Napoleon, which is where we get the term guerrilla war. Most people think it's about monkeys, but no, it's the little war. That's what guerrilla war comes from. Anyway, the reason his ideas are so influential is that people who studied them, people like Mao Zedong, Castro, Che Guevara, and Osama bin Laden in Al-Qaeda, is that the idea of how do you hurt a far superior military organization, a far more powerful country? And the answer is you get them to defend everywhere against any kind of target. It's like, can 18 guys fight the American military? No, but what can they do with box cutters on an airplane? Right. And that's where T.E. Lawrence is a genius, and the tactics that he used are now out there, and they are scary. But it just also depends on which side of history you're on. Okay, enough about that. And then we hear also from Lawrence in this conversation with Allenby what his political position is, which is that Arabia is for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them. And he tries to get Allenby and Dryden to go, yes, we agree. We have no ambitions in Arabia. And they dodge this question really beautifully.
They've only one suspicion. We'll let them drive the Turks out and then move in ourselves. I've told them that that's false, that we've no ambitions in Arabia. Have we?
I'm not a politician, thank God. Have we any ambition in Arabia, Dryden?
Difficult question, sir.
And as this scene is going on, we notice that every single person is watching them from the balconies. Yeah. Finally, we're finishing up, and he's saying, here's all the things I'm going to give to you. I want small arms. Yes. Money. Yes. Lewis guns. Right. More money. Right. Armored cars. Right. Artillery. Right. And he says, Allenby says, I'm going to give you every blessed thing I can because I know you'll use it. And they leave Lawrence alone. As they leave the bar, and he's surrounded by all these people, everyone is staring at him. He very elegantly flips the fabric on his clothes over and tries to salaam. And then they just start patting him on the back in every direction. And he runs out.
He's overwhelmed by it.
Totally overwhelmed. In our final moment with Allenby and Dryden, he says, you can't give them artillery. You give them artillery, you give them independence. And Allenby very calmly says,
then I can't give them artillery, can I?
In a way that basically means that he never intended.
Like
you can clearly tell.
And Dryden says, well, I guess that's your call. And he goes, no.
No, it's not. I've got orders to obey, thank God. Not like that poor devil. He's riding the whirlwind.
Let's hope we're not.
Intermission.
Yeah.
He's riding the whirlwind.
Yep. It's a great way to describe it.
Yep.
we have reached the end of part 1 of our discussion of Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh my God.
Ooh.
Yes.
Overture.
I'll say one quick thing about this. So I said that that I saw this when they closed down the Cinerama Dome, the last thing that played there. And one of the people I saw it with was our good friend Josh Haber, who we talked about and we'd love to have on the show.
Yeah.
He had never seen it before.
Oh.
It was his first time. Intermission came up. I turned to him sitting in the seat next to me. He had a completely stunned facial expression. And he looked at me and went, "What?" And I was like, "Well, this is Intermission." He's like, "There's more?" And I said, "Yeah." And he stood up and we started to walk, to go outside and get a breath of fresh air and stuff. And then after being stunned, pretty much like Lawrence in the fugue state for a while, just turned to me and went, "That's the greatest movie I ever saw."
Oh.
That first half of Lawrence of Arabia is the greatest.
Wow.
And I agree. I dislike going, my favorite, greatest movie, whatever.
Yeah.
The first half of Lawrence of Arabia is, for me, the greatest film ever made.
I agree. Well,
I mean, this is where we get in these conversations.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's a great movie.
It's great.
It's beyond great. It's amazing. It's a masterpiece. Like, I believe all those labels count. But I agree with you that, like, best, favorite, like all of that stuff.
Hard
like,
to say.
It is my I could tell you my top 5 movies, but like necessarily in an order because it's there's so much to do.
Yeah,
Other
I'm with you.
levels
Honestly,
with that.
that's where I am too.
But this is always at the top of the conversation for
I wish
me.
I could be as limited as you, but I cannot. Oh no, I wish I could be as open as you, but I'm limited, is what I'm trying to say. For me, it's always Kane,
Right.
Okay.
Seven Samurai, Arabia, and then Godfather 2, and then whatever the fifth one is.
You have literally built a career out of listing things in order of their topness.
There's that.
I mean, that is
We're
your
a
whole thing.
little list maniacal in the pop culture commentating world.
I mean, that's like
That's what everybody wants.
it's you and John Cusack in High Fidelity. I mean, like that is what you do. Whereas I'm always like, what does great mean? Like, for instance, like one of the things of
I know
great
I want to see it.
is size
Yeah.
and scope.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like the greatness in terms of scope of this movie is undeniable.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have a discussion of this versus Kane versus Samurai.
No.
versus, it's not. Yeah.
And I couldn't either because no one's going to change my mind.
Yeah.
But the first half of this film, I liken to the Goodfellas all the way up until it goes to the 70s. It is an exquisitely awesome, fun film. And then the switch happens. And the switch will happen now, get dark in the second part.
So you have heard what we think of the first half of Lawrence of Arabia. We are going to continue this discussion. So we're not going to go into final thoughts. I don't think we need to right at this time. But we're going to just say that if you want to reach us, you can do so on our Facebook page. You can visit our website to buy the movies. You can subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and all those other things. Reviews and comments. You've heard me say all these things before. Patreon page where you can suggest a film. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me on Twitter at SR Morris. John, where can they reach you?
You can also find me at The Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram.
And Rachel, if they were to reach you on the webs, where would that be?
I am also on Twitter and Instagram at Rachel J. Cushing.
Rachel J. Cushing. Thank you so much. This has been so great having you here.
Thank you. I could talk about this movie for longer than the runtime of this movie quite easily.
Well, you are in luck because we are going to continue talking about
Yes,
this
we
movie
are.
when you come back for the
Absolutely.
Cine-Files for part 3 of Lawrence of Arabia.